A very good morning to you. Welcome. Today is Wednesday, 24th of March. Right, so Paul has been talking about in 1 Corinthians 3, verses 5 to 9. He's been talking about one plants, another waters, another reaps, but God gives the growth. And then he changes his imagery, his picture, in verse 9. For we are God's fellow workers, you are God's field, God's building. So he was talking about a field and about sowing and reaping and remembering to water. Very important to remember to water. And then he changes it to God's building. So those who labour for God, those who work to build the kingdom, are in one sense planting seeds in a field, and in another sense contributing to the development of a building. Now, Terry and I, Terry likes watching it, we quite often watch documentaries on about people designing their own buildings and building their own buildings. And it's always an astonishment to me that with these documentaries available to watch, there are actually people who decide to build a building and do not realise, as is true in every single documentary we've ever watched, that it always takes longer than you think it's going to take. There are always supply difficulties, there are always weather problems, it always takes longer, and it always costs more. It doesn't matter how much they've estimated for the build, it always goes awry. And there is a story that Jesus told when he talked about people becoming followers of his. He said nobody decides to build a building without considering the cost and the time it will take to build it. Otherwise they'll get halfway through the building and have to abandon it. In the same way, nobody goes to war without considering how many troops he's got and how many the opposition have got, what the armament is like, what the training is like, and how likely he is to win or not. And this is one of the reasons why I believe it's very important that we don't just tell people the gospel, but we actually tell them that how serious it is and how all-consuming it is, because otherwise we have people who make a decision but never become disciples because it's too difficult and they hadn't realised what they were agreeing to when they first find it. And then he talks about the building, doesn't he? God's building. And verse 10, he says, according to the grace given to me, like a skilled builder, I laid a foundation and another man is building on it. Paul identified his role in the building of the building that was to be built for Jesus as the one who laid the foundation, the one who first preached the gospel to the Corinthians. He laid the foundation, and now he wasn't with them. Others were building on that foundation. And if you've ever watched any of these programs or ever done anything about building, what is very, very, very important is the foundation. You need to dig deep and make really good, solid foundations. And then he says, let every man take care how he builds upon it. And then whatever we build for God, the first absolute 100% necessity is the word, necessity, is that the foundation is right. If the foundation is wrong, the building will not last. It will not stand. It will not. And Jesus told a story about that as well, didn't he? You remember the story about the two men who built houses, one on sand and one on rock? And which house was it that survived the storm? It's at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. It's about Matthew 7, I think. The end of Matthew 7. The end of Matthew 7. The two people who built houses. Which one lasted? The one that had the foundation on the rock. Whatever we do for the kingdom, the foundation must be Jesus. There's no other foundation. There's nothing else that lasts. The foundation must be right. Be careful to lay the right foundation. Our foundation cannot be our denomination, our style of worship, the church we go to. If our foundation is the church we go to, suppose that church folded. Would we have, what would we do? If our foundation is on the personalities that we worship with at the moment, or the people who teach us, or the, or the building. Some people, their devotion to God is centered on a building, and they wouldn't go anywhere else. What is your foundation? It is the foundation that needs to be right. And if you build your foundation on Jesus Christ, and that for me means suppose the leadership of your church changes and the preaching is no longer centered on Jesus, and you have a preacher who tells you that the miracles never happened, and who tells you that Jesus never rose from the dead, and that he wasn't born of a virgin, all the miracles, or that tells you the miracles ended in the New Testament. Someone who teaches you something that changes the foundation of Jesus, who said, you will do greater things than I've done. If that happens, if you keep going to that church, you are building on a foundation that is not Jesus. And the person who's teaching you is building on a foundation that is not Jesus. We must build on the right foundation. Otherwise, the structure we build will not last. And even if it lasts in this world, it will not last when the Lord assesses the work that we've done. We must lay the right foundation. And there is only one foundation on which we build our lives, and that is on Jesus and his death and resurrection. It must be core central to our faith. And if we do that, we will have a strong, deep foundation. And whatever this world sends against it, whatever, just like this pandemic, we have lasted through this pandemic with joy and thanksgiving. Why? Because our foundation is solid. Our foundation is Jesus Christ. Whatever happens to you, nothing can change. Nothing can separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus. Nothing at all. And we must keep that foundation firmly laid on Jesus and nobody and nothing else. There's a thought for the day. Enjoy your day. I'm sure I'm going to enjoy mine. Enjoy your day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.